Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Algebra 1. Hopefully this is working. Hopefully you did these last two. Shouldn't be too complicated. Got another situation where you're trying to plug in a variable expression into an equation. So you're plugging in b minus 5 into this function f. And of course, we said f before. Multiply something by -2, and then subtract 7 from it. So b times -2 is -2b. -5 times -2 is +10. And hopefully you got something that looks like that. Now I notice as I'm watching myself do this video, there's a delay. Hopefully that delay is not irritating you as much as it's irritating me. Combine some like terms over here, and that's all you can really do. 10 minus 7, of course, you all know is 3. Hopefully you got that answer before, and it makes sense. So you don't always have a numerical answer. If you input a number into a function, you're usually going to get a number. If you input variables, you could get something in terms of those variables. The last one, if you input a fraction, you might get a fraction on the way out, which is what happens here. You're probably hoping this said f of 1/2, which would have been a little easier. This is g of 1/2. So you can take 1/2 and plug it into g, to function g, I should say. So you're going to do 1/2 times 1/2 times 1/2. That's the hard part. And then multiply it by 5. When you're done with that, you're going to do add 1/2 and add 1. The last part of that being the easy part of this problem. So the first part, cubing the 1/2. 1/2 times 1/2 times 1/2. Half times a half is a fourth. 1/4 times 1/2 is 1/8. And of course, if you have 1/8 and you multiply it by 5, you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5/8. So hopefully you get to that pretty simply. Then you got to do 5/8 plus a half plus 1. Ignore the 1 for a minute and just add the fractions. Get common denominators. I gave you relatively simple ones. 1/2 is the same thing as 4/8. 4/8 and 5/8. Well, think of it like it's pizza. You got 4 out of 8 slices and you got 5 out of 8 slices. You put those together and you got more than one pizza. You got 1 1/8 of a slice. If you add the 1, the whole number back onto that, you get 2 1/8. Done. So you can put a line underneath that if you want. I also noticed on your paper, I forgot to mention it on up here, there's a question on your paper that says, what does f of x mean? And you can put that, you can answer that a lot of different ways in your own words. F of x just means a function of x. It means the value of f is a function of the variable x and whatever you input in there. So it means f of x means a function of x. It means x is the variable that is independent. It means f depends on x. It means all of those things. So you can certainly, it's a good time to rewind and hear that again if you want to write down some version of that. Your next example on your paper is really about domain and range, which we've talked about. They're alphabetical, D and R being relative to x and y. The domain is really x values, and the range is really y values. So I gave you this function on your paper. It looks like it's a linear function. And I give you the domain. In other words, I gave you 4 different x values. I want you to take those 4 different x values and just plug them in. In other words, find f of 1. Plug in the 1 and see what you get. And you're going to get fractions for most of these. So f of 1 means you multiply 1 by 2/3 and you add 3 to it. That's what this function is doing. Multiply something by 2/3 and then add 3. So you get basically 2/3 plus 3, which is just 3 2/3. Done. First value. Next one, you're going to take the 2 and plug it into function f. 2 times 2/3, you're just doubling the 2/3, so you'd have 4/3. And then you're going to add 3 to that. Well, 4/3 is really 1 1/3. If you add 3 to that, you get 4 1/3. I'm not really showing a whole lot of that. Hopefully I'm talking through it and you understand the simplicity of the fractions I'm giving you. The next one's kind of the nice one. You plug in 3. And because it's divisible by 3, 2/3 of 3, is just 2. And then you add 3 to that, you get 5. So that's beautiful. The other way to think of this, if you look at these values I'm giving you, and this goes in order 1, 2, 3, 4, this is a linear function. So each value, if these are 1, 2, 3, 4, should go up by whatever the slope is. So this guy goes up by 2/3. This goes up by 2/3. You don't even need the function to know this is going to be 5 2/3. And of course, if you plugged in 4, you could get that. 4 times 2 is 8. And 8/3 is 2 2/3. You add that on, you get 5 2/3. Now, I don't know if you realize this. We've kind of answered this question. This question says, find the range of the function if it has the domain of only these 4 numbers, which is different than saying find the range of the function, blah, 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 and nothing else after it. This is the range of this thing is really just 4 specific numbers. If you input these 4 numbers and only those 4 numbers, you get the range that we just came up with, all these numbers here. So there's the range of that first question. It's just the y values when you only have these 4 x values. So I just want you to be familiar with domain is the x's, range is the y values of any given situation. The second question on there says sketch a graph of this function with that domain, which basically means don't sketch, and this is why this question is here, don't sketch a graph of this linear function. Don't graph a line. Just plot these 4 points. Because this function only has 4 points on it because of this restricted domain of only 4 values. This is basically 1, 3 2/3, 2, 4 1/3, 3, 5, there's the easy one, and then 4, 5 2/3. So take a minute, good time to pause it, plot those 4 points. And yeah, they're in between, you can estimate where they are. The first one, of course, 1, and I go up 3 and a little more, closer to 4. The next one I go up 2 and go up 4 1/3, so I'm a little bit up from that. Of course, the only one that's on an even integer value, 3, 5, and the last one is up 2/3 now. So yeah, if I were to graph the line y equals as opposed to f of x, y equals 2/3 x plus 3, I would graph this as a continuous line. That's how these two things are different. It's called a restricted domain. There's only certain values we're talking about here. So this would be a continuous line. Because I added this stuff about the domain on here, a little bit smaller space. I'm going to pause before I go on to the next one. I'd like you to try it, read through it, see if you can answer any of these questions before I give you any answers. And I'll be back in a moment.